The orcs are out of the monster manual. That's the big topic right now. I've got a fresh perspective, one from a 90s kid who didn't necessarily see orcs the same pathway as everyone else. Neither the old school OGs, the Grognards, whatever you want to call them, nor the newer kids that grew up after the Lord of the Rings movie. So I'll give you my perspective, and I'm going to do that in the form of a slideshow. I'm going to show you the most memorable takes on orcs that I ran into over the years. Obviously, the first one comes from not The Hobbit. You see this, you think, okay, we're talking Tolkien. We're talking the animated Tolkien. That was my first exposure. And this is what orcs look like in that. I have friends that to this day, this is still like one of their more memorable versions. It might not be the one that like they want to fight in a D&D game, but it's the one they remember and they love the scenes. And where there's a whip, there's a way. Everyone loves that song, right? Maybe not. But yeah, obviously this is more the classic orc, the way they looked in older D&D, and I'll kind of show you some examples of that. Obviously a little more cartoonized for this. Definitely servants of evil, but given that nature that you need in a cartoon, not to scare a bunch of kids away. So I'll kind of continue on, because this is where I tend to take a deviation. Now, I'm an 82 kid, so I grew up hitting this stuff more like 89 forward. So you'd think like AD&D, right? No, I don't hit D&D till way later, and I'll talk about that. So the next game I played was a board game called Battle Master that I got for like one of my birthdays, and me and my friend Tom would play this all the time. In this game, you have an army of men and an army of, I want to say orcs, but they were like the beastmen. They were evil, whatever that unit was called. A lot of the units were orcs. This is what they looked like. I didn't have cool painted figures like that. I had little plastic guys. I want to say they had like a black plastic to them, if memory serves. But yeah, either or worked perfectly for my imagination. And one of these things this board game did is it gave you the chance to, as you played through like scenarios against each other, you could turn around and like level up certain units going into the next scenario against one another. But it was a player versus player, like more of a traditional board game. Moving on, the next exposure I had, and this is the closest thing I got to role-playing. I guess I consider this in a way my first role-playing game or experience is Dragon Quest. So this is like a box set Dungeon and Dragon. It's very here you go kind of style of play, which was what I needed because we didn't have anyone teaching us. So as a 12-year-old, like I really think that like the starter sets that Chaosium's putting out, I know D&D has them, but like I think you need to get down to like real basics. I think Chaosium's figured out a whole bunch that other companies haven't, that you could learn from, including the learn how to play in a scenario by yourself first. That's a brilliant idea for someone that doesn't want to necessarily learn in the middle of a game. But anyways, the orc in this game, now I could be wrong about this being an orc, but I'm almost certain this was the orc of that era. This does come from the guide, so I've confirmed that much, and I think that's an orc and not like a hobgoblin or something, but I could be wrong. If I am wrong, this is what I always assumed it was orcs, just based off of, if you go backwards, this and this seemed to resonate well. Again, given he's standing on a head, I pictured definitely something that likes the idea of being ruthless, cruel, evil. Continuing forward. Now, strangely enough, I got into role-playing games outside of D&D from there. I never really got a chance to play this. I've thumbed through AD&D 2nd edition probably like 20 times, but I never played it. I got into Vampire the Masquerade, and then that GM taught me a whole bunch of games. TSR, Marvel superheroes role-playing, Legend of the Five Rings, Call of Cthulhu, Vampire the Masquerade I mentioned. And then my taste branched out from there. But eventually I had a small game group, and in that rotation we did play AD&D, and I had some memorable experiences running around that game. What I thought was fascinating about that game, though, is actually I won't even go there. What I will do is show you just the orc that I understood orcs to look like there. I believe this is out of the monster manual for 2E. If I'm wrong, you can butcher me in the comments. It's okay. So again, it's a little more lithe and weird looking than the pudgy ones back at the Hobbit, but still trending along the same lines. Visually, seems to fit well enough. So we're now hitting like maybe 1999 at this point, and this is still my understanding of an orc. But then comes 3E, and this is an interesting twist for me because I played 2nd edition. They didn't have a half orc as a playable thing, AD&D 2nd edition. So when the half orc shows up as a playable race in 3rd edition, and I buy this book, I'm gonna all in now. I'm like, this is the edition I'm gonna pick up and learn, because it's like it was taken off on campus where I went to school, and I'm like, I want to be a part of that. When I opened up the book and saw this, I'm like, oh cool, an orc. And then I'm like, it's pretty tall, but that's still cool, maybe a barbarian or something. And it's like half orc, and I stop and I'm like, why a half orc? I mean, like at this point I was somewhat familiar with Lord of the Rings. I think I read through it, but I didn't get all the way through it, so I didn't get to mention of the half orcs. I paused because I'm like, why not just put an orc as a playable race? That's really weird to me. Like, why not just do something interesting with the orc and make them like misunderstood? Like maybe this might have been all those exposures to games like Vampire with, different understandings, and understanding how the real world worked and all that. Being a young college age kid, I'm like, people get misunderstood all the time. Maybe it's just the orcs clash with the humans in a species war where they don't really understand one another. That's where my mind was going, and I saw the orc in that setting, and again, kind of much the same, though they're getting a little bit. This one's probably the most like brawny and big out of the whole mix I've showed you so far. Not as stout as the original or like the cartoon Hobbit one, but definitely like this looks like a big dude, like someone you don't want to get in an arm wrestling contest with, or someone that could compete in WWE. So it was a cool view, and definitely different than the half orc they present in the book. And that kind of got my mind going, okay, what creates a half orc? There's very obvious scenarios that lead to that. I'm like, whatever. Like at the time that did not faze me. It still doesn't, but it didn't really faze me. Moving into my next exposure, that would be the Lord of the Rings movies, which was right about the same time. It's possible I could flip these around, but I don't think so. I think I watched Fellowship after I got the D&D books for 3rd edition, and the exposure to these orcs, they were different looking. Where the tusks go, they still were hideous though, and they were still definitely servants of evil. They were recognizable enough to me, and I knew enough again from the Lord of the Rings books and the Hobbit, where I could kind of piece these things together and go, they're servants of the Dark Lord, they're ruthless, they're evil, there's no redemption in them. That's just what orcs are. Interesting enough. Now, I had homebrewed all sorts of monster classes in 3rd edition, and I got to the point where, in my own home brewing, there were certain settings where orcs were big evil dudes, and other settings where orcs were more tribal, and they maybe were inherently viewed as evil because of some of their tribal ways, but maybe that was more of a contention, so they're willing to kill you on sight because you are one of the races that they instantly recognize as a threat. And then that's hostility equals evil sometimes, right? So that was a take I definitely wasn't like against at the time, and still not. Eberron, the first game I remember in formal D&D that made the orc a playable race in a player's handbook. You could play a half orc, I believe, too, but the orc in this were just like I was homebrewing. They were more kind of like tribal and not misunderstood, or tribal, and thus clashed with some of the other species of the realm. I'm using species and race interchangeably. I will note this. If you were to take me back to the 90s and try to test whether I thought species or race was a better application for the concept of a different monster, I probably would have chose species. And playing Star Wars West End games. Oh, that was another one I forgot. Species didn't seem that weird to me, honestly. I'll get to that in a bit. There's one last one I want to go over before we get to what the new orcs look like. This is a game called Orc World, written by John Wick. This system I could do with or without, but the setting was fantastic. It really leaned hard into like almost an anthropological view of orcs, and it leads in with a really sort of punchy introduction of the game about this game being written because someone told John that orcs can't be bards. And so John made a game where the best orc ever was a bard, and it's someone they all revere. Every race in this game kind of steps on the orcs in their own way. They're all extreme versions of what the races might look like from the orcs' eyes. So the elves are like these like terrible, like almost vampiric monsters to the orcs. The dwarfs are just ruthless, kill first mountain men, and the humans in this are Roman expansionists, basically, threatening the orcs. I played one campaign in this game. We fell in love with it. We never went back. I think some of that was, it just wasn't our favorite system, but the setting was brilliant, and we really had a good time with it. I won't get into the details because I could, maybe if you want to hear a video about our Orc World experience, I might even be able to dig up some old school info on it. Let me know in the comments, and I will gladly make a video if I get a few people showing interest. So the last thing I want to do here is I will just quickly show the bringing us forward now to the 2024 orcs. They are now a playable race in 5th edition, or in D&D 2024. Their appearance looks a little bit different. The more prominent tusks are back, but they're very human looking, like almost more human than half orcs looked previously, which is weird, but whatever, it is what it is. To me, this photo looks like a blend of League of Legends mixed with a Hallmark stock photo that you'd put in. So I don't get a lot of inspiration from this. It sort of feels like Genera Orc. But I will kind of say this. The orc is out of the monster manual in 2024. Or at least it's relegated to the appendices alongside the other species, which no longer called races, in this setting. And I understand some of the logic as to what has brought them here, but I think it's not really what we're all arguing. Like, I think this picture to me says a lot about the corporate world playing it safe in a tabletop role-playing game, trying to present something that no one will be sort of put off by. And to be honest, I'm tired of safe. Like, I want to see things, to me, tabletop role-playing games, one of the best things about it is it's a safe place to ask like sort of difficult questions through your plots and your storylines. And that's just my style. That might not be the way kids want to play D&D in 2024. This could be old man yelling at cloud. Like, I get that. I just want to say this to me, it's just another move away from D&D for me. I'll be honest with you, it was never in my top 5 games. But 5th edition, when it first came out, there was enough there with advantage and other things that I kind of hated in previous editions, where I saw some value. But as the expansions and the pieces came out on top of 5e, it became less and less interesting to me. It felt more like you were playing a MOBA, again, League of Legends, with a skin-packed character, looking and being however you want to be. And that's just not my thing. Like, I like for this species or the races to mean something more to the world. I think it adds really interesting and complex scenarios rather than just kind of doing this whole be whatever, look whatever you look like. I mean, that's part of what turned me off of ever playing MMOs to begin with. I just didn't like that. It drew me out of the setting, not into it, to make it feel like it was just really kind of generic and be what you want to be. Like, if nothing has a true place in the world, then nothing matters. And I think I'll leave you with that. Those are my thoughts. I know I'm going to get some people that flat out disagree, and probably my centrist approach, like most things, will probably have haters on both sides. But I welcome all the comments, all the feedback. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hope you enjoyed.